welcome. Thanks for stopping by. I'm going to share with you how I grew my shoulders without ever training them directly over the past several years. In this clip, you can see here that my shoulders used to not be as big. I don't know if you want to classify them as small. It depends if you're a lifter and you're used to seeing frickin' delts injected with test and tren and everything else. Or if you're just a regular everyday person, you may think that my delts are not small, but objectively speaking, they were smaller than they are now. They've grown fairly substantially over the past couple of years from just doing arm workouts. And so a question that I get a lot here that chocolate says is, how have you built your shoulders? Cheers to more gains. And there's two components to this answer. And you're going to be able to take something away from this to not necessarily grow your shoulders from not directly training them, but the lesson that's going to be baked into this is going to be really useful for you to take and then go apply to your training to build more muscle. The first aspect is from a technical standpoint. The only tricep exercise I've done is behind the head dumbbell extensions. More recently, I've started working in the cable, but it's the same movement, just with the cable. And what I've noticed is that when I push with really high intensity, these stabilizing muscles, the chest, the back, and the shoulders come online a little bit because I'm taxing the working muscles, the triceps primarily, to such levels of fatigue and intensity that the other muscles are working. And when you elevate, when you crank that knob of intensity so high, they get brought online a bit more. Also, the use of drop sets. So if you're not familiar, you do a set and then you rest a little bit and you drop the weight a little bit. You rest like maybe 20 seconds, drop the weight, do another set, and you keep repeating this over and over if you're doing like 3-4 drops, or maybe you just do one drop. Whatever, the point is that none of the muscles, including the working muscle, have time to fully recover, but in particular, this fatigue on the stabilizing muscles I've found to be elevated as it compounds from one set to the next without giving those muscles adequate time to recover, and I get more of a burn in my delts, my shoulders, my lats. I don't really feel a burn in my chest, but I've managed to stimulate some chest growth. So intensity and drop sets in that position activate all of those muscles as stabilizers. And the delt is responsible for, depending on how scientific and isolated we want to get, the front delt is more responsible for raising your arm up in front of you, the side delt out to the side, the rear delt bringing it backwards. But when you're up in that position with your arms overhead, the delt is activated some to hold your arms in that position, especially if you're using these cues that I always use, which is to keep my shoulders down, scoop my elbows around, and then let the elbows drift back some. When I lock all that in, I feel much more tension going on to my delts, back, and a little bit on the chest. Now, the more important ingredient, now that I've kind of roughly explained from a technical aspect how that is physically possible, I think the more important thing for you to take is that when you crank the intensity up to psychotic, maniac levels, all of your muscles start to get stimulated to some degree, even in an isolation movement, like training for your triceps or your biceps. And I think the problem is nowadays a lot of people's view has been skewed to think that you only train a muscle when you specifically do an exercise for it. And a lot of that is due to some of the more popular information or content being put out, I would say overemphasizing the need to isolate all your individual muscles for the average person who's in there, not necessarily on gear or on gear, whatever, but you're not trying to get on an Olympia stage. You're not layering on 50 additional pounds of muscle. You're trying to gain 10 pounds of muscle, 20 pounds of muscle, just so you can look a bit more jacked, right? For you, the need to isolate each individual head of your deltoids, of your biceps, of your triceps is massively overstated. And a symptom of this is that the general consciousness, which is, again, I'm not criticizing anyone, but the general view then is that to train any muscle, you need to do an exercise to specifically isolate it. And I think it's underestimated how much your whole body is activated in any movement, particularly if you push with high enough intensity. And I think that there's been an over kind of dramatization of the science world or the debate about training and how you're supposed to train. And I recently watched a couple videos, which I'm going to link in the description. I'm going to remember to do it this time. I know sometimes I say that and then I don't. I watched Jeff Nippard's recent video called Everyone Thinks I'm Wrong About Training, and he conducts his own study about doing how beneficial is it to focus on lengthened ranges of motion, this whole stretch-mediated hypertrophy thing. Do exercises where the muscles in a stretch is supposed to lead to more growth. That's kind of the latest hubbub in the science world. And he's doing a study. Well, go watch the video, you'll see. And then I see another one here from Wolf Coaching, full range of motion is best. And like the intro to this video is like so dramatic. And it's like all these different people with their different takes about training and full range of motion is not, and this range and this, and here's the lens. Like, I'm just like, what's the point? Like, what are you guys doing? The thing I want to point out is like none of it's wrong, but I think what's missing is an appreciation of the hierarchy of priorities in terms of what stimulates muscle growth. And this is what produces this situation. It's going to make sense. So at the very top, to me, 100% is intensity, training intensity. And this is the number one thing people lack. And it's so simple that there isn't much content to be made about it. So you can't make endless videos and create all this drama and this person says that and a new study and this analysis of range of motion and tempo and rep range and whatever else it's going to be that we're going to analyze at a micro level. You can't really do that you could study intensity, but it's a bit limited. And at the end of the day, the main thing that most people are missing from what I've seen as a trainer and working in gyms in many different roles over many, many years, decade or more, is that most people just miss the intensity. It's that simple. You warm up properly, you be smart about your training, you learn how to do the movements properly, and then you push your ass to the mat. You got to get nasty with it. Put some tunes in, take some pre-workout if you need, and get fucking dirty with the movement. People just don't do that. And if you walk into any gym, you'll see that. And at the end of the day, people exercising, that's great. But if you have goals and you're caught up in this drama and there's like millions of views on all these videos, there's a huge audience for it. The main thing that all these people are missing is just simply training intensity. If you just train insanely hard, be smart about it to avoid injury and stay healthy, and then train insanely freaking hard. If you walked into a gym and you see, even 50% of the lifters training their ass off, I'd be like, here we go, now we're cooking. Really, it's like 5%, like it's rare to the point where if I see somebody who's actually getting after it, I'll go up and I'll be like, I'm not hanging out for a full conversation. I'll give them a pound. I'll say, I love your intensity. It's firing me up to train harder. I'll go back to lifting. But that just points out that it's rare. And you can do the eye test yourself. Next time you're in the gym, it's great. Anybody that's in there that's exercising, but people are not training with high enough intensity. It's really that freaking simple. And then as you go down the list, I would say the next thing is probably consistency, going to all your sessions all the time. And then the next thing is progression of your training somehow. So finding a way to progress the weight or have some variability and that you're evolving your training. And then I would say the fourth thing is like the analysis of all these structural details and trying to figure out, is doing just lengthen partials, is that better? Is this rep range better? Is it like all this stuff that people are hyper fixating on? I would say is number 4 on the hierarchy of priorities of what actually leads to growth. And the amount of content dedicated to the 3 things above that is massively disproportionately underrepresented. There's not as much content because it's boring, because there's nothing to say really. You can't create drama, you can't create all these additional studies. But this is my point that I'm trying to make to you, is to give you the mindset and the perspective that's going to best equip you to go out and get the most results possible with your efforts. These are the things you actually need to focus on. And the reason that they're not stated and they're not emphasized as much is because of this, because it doesn't sell, because it doesn't make as good of content, because people can't necessarily attach their brand, their ego, their career to just the simple phrase of train harder. There's not much, like people go, okay, cool, and then they move on. Let me find somebody that's got a whole bunch of interesting takes and all this like detailed process that I can like absorb, and So for you, the lifter, this is what I'm saying is like, it's not bad. And I think there's this whole thing of like where everybody's getting like pointing the finger at each other. I'm just a small little creator in my little corner here. Not that many people are really listening. That's fine. But the people that are, this is what has helped me cut through it. Because once upon a time, I was the same person consuming all this information and going out and applying it. It just becomes so clear over time. And anybody who's an experienced lifter, who actually trains hard, who's super dedicated and super motivated to it, comes to the same conclusion that this is overkill. It's lower down on the priority list. But for these reasons, it's being highlighted as the most important thing. And I think it actually ends up distracting you, because then you get so caught up and you're spending time watching, Jeff Nippard's video, which is, this is amazing content. And I watched this and I was like, kudos to this man. Leave a like, everything else, because he's doing his own study. But
the internet thinks
it deserves the views. It has 261,000 views in 4 hours. It deserves that. But I just don't think everybody has the context to step back and go, this only frickin' matters if things 1 through 3 are checked. And I know he says that too. But the end default is there just isn't very much content to make about things 1, 2, 3. So the majority of the content is about number 4, all these little details about working out. Again, 1, 2, 3 is intensity, consistency, and some form of progression. So just wanted to put that out there for you. And that's, so the point would be to build my shoulders, I've just done it through intensity, consistency, and progression of my arm training. And what you should take from that is, wow, those parameters are so much more important. And if you can train your shoulders properly, do freaking shoulder exercises. But remember that watching shoulder exercise breakdown videos should only be done if you train insane and are smart about it, always go to your sessions, and then are finding some way to progress your training or continually challenge yourself so that you don't get stuck in a plateau, doing the same thing over and over again. Then this content is the next thing down that's going to be useful to optimize your efforts even further. That's the point that I want to make, and that's my real life experience shows that. And people are like, wow, it used to be, again, that people would just be commenting that, my physique is underdeveloped in my delts or my chest or my back. And now more and more people are starting to ask how, or say that I'm lying, or the amount of your potentially not natural comments are increasing a bit too. And I'm completely natural, and I'm just doing arm workouts. If you follow the channel here, you can, I guess it's possible that I could be secretly training my chest. But at that point, it's you gotta really assume that I'm mentally super unwell. I'm very unstable. If this whole thing is a ruse, for what? For what, man? I dreamt this up in my basement one night. Ooh, I'm gonna lie about and say I only train. You just gotta take my word for it, man. Trust me, if I could train my chest directly or my shoulders directly, I would I'd be in there today, this moment, doing it. I would love nothing more than to be able to do a set of bench press again. Maybe one day. So that's the lesson there of how I've been able to see some growth in my delts, is that you're overestimating the need for isolation, and you're underestimating the potency of incredibly high levels of intensity. Those are the two main drivers. Now, the next question here I'm going to bring up that kind of segues into this next point here. Oi Mickey 6110 is asking about training frequency for triceps. And triceps stay sore a little bit longer than the biceps. How long should I wait? Is it okay if they're a little bit sore? And the answer that I'm going to give you here is that it plays into what I'm talking about with intensity. In the same way that I want to make it clear that I strongly believe intensity is your number one thing, and your frequency and your volume don't necessarily matter that much until you have intensity and consistency mastered. If you just hit a muscle, your triceps, once a week with maxed out intensity for 5 quality sets with a bit of an extended rest time to let yourself fully recuperate, superset it with biceps, of course, using a 3 to 5 minute rest window and going balls to the wall, and you do that just once a week and you sustain that for 6 months, you will see progress. 100%. And that will be better than anything else, especially if you're new. And your body, there almost isn't a need to train more often than that if you're seeing progress. And when you start out, I think a frequency of once a week is going to be good enough, because it's not necessary to do 2 or 3 times a week if you can see progress just doing once a week. Start with that. Make sure that you go to put all your energy instead into actually going to every single session for your triceps and biceps or whatever other muscle group and training your fucking ass off. Master those things, because that is disproportionately going to drive way more of your growth over time than any other factor. Trust me. And then after like a year, 6 months, something like that, you'll start to plateau off and you'll start to notice, okay, I'm not really seeing as much growth in my muscles. My strength numbers aren't continue to go up. That's when it's then useful to scale up your frequency and your volume. But, and I know on this channel, if you're familiar, like I'm a pretty big advocate of like a higher than normally accepted amounts of volume and higher amounts of frequency than most people are like comfortable with. And I didn't start like that. And I'm not just like on that train no matter what. I started in the Mike Mentzner group, which is you train super high intensity and you take extensive amounts of rest days before you go and train the muscle properly. And what I found is that that is a really good place to start, and that it forces you to focus on the thing that is going to be the primary driver of your growth. But you need to be able to detach from that ideology and add additional volume and frequency in as you go. And I've mentioned this before on the channel, that not being married to any one specific ideology is critical to continue to see progress, because this is a great example. If you see results with a Mentzner type of approach with maximum high intensity, pretty low volume, and very low frequency, it's difficult to let go of that because you've convinced yourself that's how it works and it's going to carry you to a certain point. But in my experience, that carries you to a certain point and then you're stuck, man. And unless you're willing to change something, you're not going to see additional growth. And at that point, increasing your frequency to train twice a week, maybe 3 times a week, each muscle, and increasing your volume up potentially to 10 or 15 sets per workout instead of just like 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever, is going to produce results. But you should do it progressively based on how your body's responding. So once you bump your frequency up to twice a week, that'll probably give you a spark of more growth. And just keep doing that until it starts to level off again. And then maybe bump your sets up. Instead of just doing 5, go up to 10. And so to answer this question directly, I hope that you can see the context of what I've laid out is going to give you like the template to apply to yourself of what to do. If you're starting out, 100% wait until your triceps are completely recovered and develop your foundational habitual practices of intensity and consistency. That's so much more important than any benefit you're going to get from maybe training a little bit more often. Is not nearly as valuable as the benefit you're going to get from mastering high level intensity. And the only way that you can develop that skill is to fucking beat the drum at it. And I think that's what's lost on a lot of people is you say high intensity, not everybody knows what that looks like. And you have to experience it and pour into your sets going, I'm going to give everything I have. And then you realize that over time you develop this ability to push yourself to limits that you never would have previously conceived possible. And that's honing in on that process of intensity and really owning it. And a lot of people just can't do it. It's not in you, or you're not committed enough, and you get distracted with these other factors. And shutting the noise off to focus in on this process is definitely going to disproportionately produce, I feel like I've said disproportionately a lot in this video, it's going to produce way more muscle growth over time. So in the beginning, if you're just starting out, I would say wait until your triceps are 100% recovered, because you're in that newbie gains phase where you're going to be able to make great progress, and there's no need to push the envelope there. But if you are a year in of being super consistent, or 2 years in and you're plateaued out, then what I've seen is that moderate levels of soreness can be trained through and could be beneficial to do so. This is on my own specific experience, okay? In that, initially I followed this, and then I bumped my frequency up to twice a week, and then eventually I experimented with every day is arm day, and then I backed off to every other day. And I found for kind of an extended period of time, every other day is arm day was really effective for me. And sometimes that means I'd train arms Monday and I'd take Tuesday off and then I'd hit them again Wednesday. Sometimes on Wednesday, my triceps or my biceps, but usually the triceps, similar to you, Oi Mickey, would potentially be a little bit sore still. But I noticed that I was still able to train effectively and gain strength and produce muscle growth training when they're a bit sore. Small caveat is that I highly recommend you warm up properly first. In the case with me, I'm doing these dumbbell overhead extensions. I'm doing 6-7 warm-up sets with starting with lightweight and progressively increasing it up to my working weight. And in those sets, I'm sussing out how my body's feeling. And if it's possible that there's an issue with my shoulder or something, or the soreness in my triceps is too extreme, then I won't do the workout. That hasn't happened yet. You'd be surprised what your body could work through, but you need to go through that progression, particularly if you're sore. I think your risk of injury is higher, and you need to make sure you warm up into it so that then you go, okay, I'm feeling good. You know, like if my working weight's 110 pounds, the last warm-up set with a 100-pound dumbbell, like I want that to feel fucking good. I want everything to feel solid. And if it doesn't, I continue to do mobility and warm up and do additional warm-up sets. And then once it feels good, then I jump into my working set and I'm confident that everything's going to be okay. So if you're more advanced, I think it could be worth it to push the envelope and train through a bit of soreness is my answer in a simple sense. If you're a beginner, it's not worth it. And that's because the benefits from higher frequency are only valuable if you're more advanced. And if you have this foundation of intensity and consistency going. Then, and also at that point, what I've seen is you may need the higher frequency to spark additional growth, because this idea of going to the gym, training super hard, and then just waiting like extensive periods of time to recover, for me, lost its efficacy as I progressed through my training. In the beginning, it was really effective. And now for my arms, that doesn't work. And I would say that probably got me to like 17 or 17 and a half. And then from there, I had to up the frequency and volume to see more growth. And what I've seen additionally is that when I've backed off the frequency and volume, I've actually lost some of that growth. And so to force your body to add additional muscle, the frequency and volume parameters can be very useful to just create a more intense stimulus and demand. And so building up, the last point I would leave is that if you're a beginner, I think your experience with like understanding your muscles and the movements is a little bit lower too. So training sore for that reason is not worth it as well. But if you're more advanced and you're stuck in a plateau, I think pushing the envelope and upping your frequency and volume can produce additional results. And for me, I would say those are the main things, or some of the main things that sparked that additional half inch or inch of growth to get up over 18-inch arms. 100%. Because I was plateaued for an extensive period of time, not kind of bumping those parameters up. That's it. Thanks for watching. I hope that helps you. If you want to do any of my arm workouts, or you want to, check out my specific arm courses, you can go to my website or my Only Arms. All this footage that has been playing in the background here, I condensed down to give it to you in not a rambled 20-minute video. 60-second. This is the workout I did today. Do it if you want. Here's exactly what I did: sets, reps, tempo, rest times, everything else. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.